Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to decode the hidden architecture of the mind, specifically how early survival instincts can actually mutate into adult hoarding. Now, if you've ever wondered why your bank account can be absolutely full, but your nervous system still feels completely empty, well, you are exactly where you need to be. Let's get into it.
So, why does spending just $1 feel like a full-blown emergency, even when you're completely financially secure? It's honestly such a relatable modern problem. You've got a stable career, a growing bank account, and literally every reason to feel perfectly secure. Yet, you still live like you're one single paycheck away from total disaster. You know that sharp spike of adrenaline you get every time you have to swipe a credit card, even for something completely necessary? Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Which brings us to section 1, the quiet emergency. We all know someone like this, right? They drive an old, unreliable car, and they absolutely dread buying new clothes until the old ones are literally falling apart at the seams. Now, to the outside world, this looks like incredible financial discipline, a true success story. But internally, this person isn't experiencing success at all. They're living in a constant, quiet emergency, completely surrounded by internal warning signs. Psychology actually tells us this isn't just about being frugal or good with money. No, it's actually the visible shadow of a deep-seated scarcity mindset. Let's look at where this comes from in Section 2, the Survival Blueprint. To really understand why some adults struggle so much to spend even a single dollar on themselves, we have to look back at their childhood. Usually, it's an environment where money was essentially a ghost. Always talked about, but never actually felt as a real source of comfort or security. There's a saying, children don't lose their childhood suddenly, they outgrow it quietly. And that's exactly what happens here. These kids realize one day that the adults around them are completely overwhelmed. So whether they consciously realize it or not, they decide they have to become the responsible ones. Survival becomes the absolute only goal. And that one goal, it ends up dictating every single financial decision they make for the rest of their lives. All right, moving to Section 3, the shield of hoarding. This brings us to a really fascinating, yet rare, psychological trait that dictates these lifelong decisions. It's called survival independence. In developmental psychology, this is defined as developing an intense, early form of self-reliance when emotional or financial support is inconsistent. Basically, if a child can't rely on consistent support, their brain just adapts. It completely stops the habit of asking for help. They stop expecting comfort entirely because, honestly, in their world, those things were just never guaranteed. And there's a direct pipeline here from childhood to adulthood. That unreliable support growing up directly creates this devastating financial habit later on. As an adult, this translates into treating a massive savings account as basically the only reliable parent they've ever had. Depending on a system, a partner, or even a solid career, that feels incredibly dangerous and unpredictable to them. The crucial thing to understand is that they aren't saving for a nice vacation. They aren't even really saving for retirement. They are hoarding money to build a literal, physical wall of wealth to hide behind. It acts as a shield for that inevitable moment they believe the world is just going to pull the rug out and stop supporting them. Doing everything completely alone feels familiar and safe. Relying on absolutely anything else just feels like a major threat. Now, this feeds right into another really powerful pattern known as parentification. This happens when a child is expected to manage adult emotions or even solve adult problems way before they're actually ready. Think about it. If a kid grows up hearing their parents cry about bills or constantly feeling that heavy tension of lacking in the house, their brain learns a pretty tragic lesson. They learn to suppress their own needs just to make room for the adults. They internalize that their own desires are nothing but a burden on the family. And this dynamic creates such a heartbreaking paradox later in life. Because childhood desires were seen as a burden, the adult outcome is this extreme, overwhelming guilt when spending on oneself. Even when they have plenty of money in the bank, there's this deep internal resistance. They can effortlessly drop cash on a super generous gift for someone else, right? But the second they even consider spending money on their own pleasure, this massive wave of guilt just crashes over them. Their brain is literally still running that old script. Needing anything is a sign of weakness. So, moving on to Section 4, the burden of rest. This brings us to what might be the absolute most exhausting part of the scarcity mindset. It's like this invisible engine that keeps the nervous system running on empty. We call it uneasy rest. It's when someone actually associates periods of calm or stability with impending danger. And why is that? Well, because back in their childhood, whenever things got quiet, it usually meant something was about to go terribly wrong. Thanks to that early wiring, their adult nervous system stays on high alert 24/7. Financial stability doesn't actually feel like peace. It feels like a trap. They just feel uneasy, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can actually spot this crisis mode if you know what to look for. The symptoms are things like constantly working overtime, relentlessly cutting coupons, subconsciously restricting their own finances, and just generally feeling like stability is a total trap. The wild reality is they've literally forgotten how to exist without a problem to solve. So they subconsciously force themselves into a state of financial restriction just to feel safe inside that familiar struggle. They genuinely only feel useful when they're in the middle of a crisis. And this whole struggle is heavily reinforced by what attachment research calls the guilt for needing. That early responsibility we talked about, it creates this deep belief that being taken care of automatically means someone else is being burdened. People with this might feel that receiving care is a huge burden on others. They might apologize for their success, constantly minimize their achievements, or feel intense guilt, literally just for resting. So when they finally do achieve wealth, they have no idea how to receive it. Receiving care or comfort feels so incredibly foreign that they just retreat right back into the safety of extreme frugality. That brings us to Section 5, Identity Misalignment. Now, this is the final, and honestly probably the most difficult psychological barrier to break, identity misalignment. Look, your brain is a survival tool, right? It's literally designed to resist any action that contradicts your core self-image. So if your entire identity is built around being the one who survives on nothing, or the one who takes care of everybody else, your mind will actually subconsciously sabotage your attempts to live a life of abundance. The very idea of being wealthy feels like a literal threat to who you fundamentally are. It's like turning your back on a golden opportunity for growth simply because you're boxed in by the sheer fear of change. Taking action means you have to become someone different. And crazy enough, your brain actually fears that identity change way more than it fears being broke. You stay attached to scarcity because, truthfully, it's the only world you actually know how to navigate. You might even talk yourself out of raises or totally miss out on great investments, all just to stay aligned with your old, struggling self. Okay, let's look at how we fix this in Section 6, Rewriting Your Story. The really good news here, we can absolutely break these patterns, and it starts with some profound clinical validation. Psychology does not call you broken. Your nervous system simply adapted to pressure really early on. If you're recognizing yourself in these patterns right now, you need to understand that your frugality and your hoarding were once the exact things that kept you safe when the world felt incredibly small and dangerous. You learned strength way before you were ever allowed to be soft. But healing means learning that you are finally allowed to rest. Your value is not and has never been tied to how much you can suffer. So how do we actually heal from this? It really boils down to 3 key steps. Step 1 is awareness. So moving out of that constant state of reaction and into a space of calm observation. Step 2 is realigning identity. This means accepting your actual reality today, not your past. And step 3 is writing a new story. You are no longer that child carrying the entire weight of the world on your shoulders. In fact, your intellectual hunger to understand your own mind, which, by the way, is exactly why you're watching this explainer right now, is your absolute greatest asset. Because once you finally align your identity with your current reality, that old fear of scarcity completely loses its power over you. I want to leave you with a question to think about. When your mind is finally at peace, will your wealth be a shield, or will it be freedom? Your future isn't just some repeat of your past. It's an entirely new story that you are finally allowed to write with a steady hand. Now, if you want to keep decoding the hidden psychology of the human mind that most people completely miss, make sure to hit subscribe, because once you truly understand the world within, you start noticing the things everyone else misses. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.